"No one ever kissed me," said the trembling girl, dirt still clinging to her dark skin from the stones the children had thrown. The towering cowboy simply scooped her up in his massive arms and pressed his lips to hers. The cursed girl lived like a ghost on the edges of civilization, feared for the unsettling way she made people confess their darkest secrets with just a glance. Everyone knew she'd die alone, forgotten, another broken soul the frontier had claimed. But when the wandering cowboy arrived, warned by every merchant and sheriff to stay away from her cabin, he saw something no one else could see. What neither realized was that her strange gift held the power to heal or destroy everything they'd ever known about truth and love. Would his unexpected tenderness save them both? Or would the town's fear tear apart the only real connection either had ever found? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The dirt hit Amara's back as she hurried past the general store. Children scattered like startled birds, their cruel laughter echoing through the dusty streets of Millfield Creek. She pulled her worn shawl tighter and kept walking. "Don't look at her directly," Mrs. Henderson whispered to her daughter. "That girl's got the devil's eye." Amara had heard it all before. The cursed girl, the one who made decent folks say things they shouldn't. She ducked her head and continued toward her cabin on the outskirts of town. The memory still burned fresh from 3 years ago. She'd been 16, sitting in the back pew of the small church. Pastor Williams had been preaching about honesty when their eyes met across the congregation. The words had poured from his mouth like water through a broken dam. "I've been stealing from the collection plate to buy whiskey." The silence that followed had been deafening. Within a week, Amara found herself living alone in an abandoned cabin, working as a laundress for the few brave enough to hire her services. Sheriff Bartlett watched her now from beneath the brim of his hat. His weathered face held the same disgust she saw everywhere, the same fear. "Keep moving, girl. Don't want any trouble." Amara nodded and quickened her pace. Trouble seemed to find her whether she wanted it or not. The cabin sat like a forgotten grave marker among the scrub brush and tumbleweeds. Amara pushed through the creaking door and set down her basket of mended clothes. The silence pressed against her ears. No voices, no laughter. Just the endless whisper of wind through the gaps in the wooden walls. She moved to the small mirror hanging near her wash basin. Dark eyes stared back at her. Eyes that seemed to see too much. Her grandmother's eyes. "It's a gift, child," her grandmother had whispered on her deathbed. "Your great-grandmother had it too. Helped folks see the truth they were hiding from." But Amara had never seen it as a gift, only a curse that kept her trapped in loneliness. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon like an approaching army. Amara began preparing for another solitary evening when hoofbeats echoed across the desert. A rider approached through the growing dusk. Tall and broad-shouldered, he sat his horse with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in the saddle. His hat cast shadows across a face that had seen hard weather and harder times. He dismounted near her door just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. "Storm's coming in fast," he called out. "Wondering if I might wait it out under your roof." Amara hesitated. No one came to her cabin willingly. Most avoided it like a plague house. "You sure you want shelter here? Most folks in town would tell you to ride on." Lightning split the sky. The rain began in earnest, turning the dust to mud in seconds. "I'm Jed Morrison," he said, removing his hat, "and I don't put much stock in what most folks say." Something in his voice made her open the door wider. He led his horse to her small lean-to and stepped inside, water dripping from his coat. "Much obliged," he said, settling onto the wooden chair near her table. "Name's been Amara Washington for 19 years now." They sat in the flickering light of her oil lamp while rain hammered the roof. Jed didn't seem nervous like others did. Didn't avoid looking at her face. "You're the one they warn travelers about," he said. It wasn't a question. "Depends what they told you." "Said you make people say things they don't mean to say. Called you cursed." Amara's hands trembled as she poured water into her kettle. "Maybe they're right. And maybe they're afraid of something they don't understand. She looked up then, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. Most people flinched away when she did that, but Jed held her gaze steady and calm. The words came from him like they always did with others. But these words were different. "I've been lonely my whole life," he said quietly, riding from town to town, never staying long enough to matter to anyone. "But sitting here with you, I don't feel that emptiness." Amara stepped back, stunned. Usually people confessed their shames, their secrets, their fears. Never had anyone spoken of loneliness with such gentle honesty. "You're not afraid," she whispered. "Should I be?" The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin something had shifted. Amara felt a flutter of hope she hadn't experienced in years. "They say I'm cursed because of what happens when people look at me." "Really look at me? What do you say?" Amara was quiet for a long moment. "I say no one has ever kissed me. No one's ever wanted to get close enough." The admission hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Jed rose from his chair slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." He moved toward her with careful, respectful steps. When he reached out, his hands were gentle as they framed her face. "May I?" She nodded, barely breathing. Jed lifted her from the ground as if she weighed nothing at all, cradling her against his chest. His lips found hers in a kiss that was tender and patient and everything she had never dared to dream. When he set her down, tears streaked her cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were tears of something other than sorrow. Outside, the storm began to calm. Inside, everything had changed. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows when Amara woke. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the crushing weight of isolation. Jed sat at her table, mending a tear in his shirt with surprising skill. "Thought you might have ridden off," she said. "Got a job at the Morrison Ranch. Figure I'll stay a while." The words sent warmth through her chest. No one ever stayed. Over the following days, Jed visited after his work was done. They talked by lamplight about everything and nothing. He listened when she spoke about her grandmother, about the gift that felt more like a burden. "Tell me about her," Jed said one evening. Amara traced patterns on the wooden table. "Grandmother Rose was born a slave in Georgia. She had the same ability I do. The sight, she called it." "How did she use it?" "She helped people find courage. Slaves who were planning to run would come to her. She'd look into their eyes and make them speak their deepest fears. Once they heard those fears out loud, they could face them." Jed leaned forward. "Sounds like healing to me." "The plantation owners called it witchcraft. After freedom came, she brought our family west. But people's fear followed us. What if their fear was wrong?" Amara had never considered that possibility. Every adult in her life had treated her gift as shameful, something to hide. "I don't know how to see it any other way. Maybe it's time to try." The next morning brought Mrs. Fulton to Amara's door. The baker's wife stood wringing her hands, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by obvious distress. "I need to speak with you," Mrs. Fulton said. "About something private." Amara invited her inside. They sat across from each other in the small cabin. "Mrs." Fulton's eyes were red from crying. "I've heard what people say about you, about what happens when you look at folks." "You want to leave," Amara said. "No, I need you to look at me, really look at me." Amara hesitated. "Mrs. Fulton, I can't control what happens when I do that. I'm counting on it." Taking a deep breath, Amara lifted her eyes to meet Mrs. Fulton's directly. The effect was immediate. "I've been stealing money from my husband's till," Mrs. Fulton said, the words rushing out. "My sister back east is sick and needs medicine, but Harold would never understand. He thinks my family abandoned us when we moved west. I take a little each week and send it to her." Silence filled the cabin. Mrs. Fulton covered her face with her hands. "I'm going to hell," she whispered. But instead of judgment, Amara felt something unexpected, compassion. You're trying to save your sister's life. I'm a thief. You're a woman caught between love and fear. Amara reached across the table. What if you told Harold the truth? He'd never forgive me. What if he surprised you? Mrs. Fulton looked up with tear-filled eyes. You really think he might understand? I think love is stronger than fear when it's given the chance. That evening, Mrs. Fulton returned with her husband. Harold's arm was around his wife's shoulders, his face peaceful rather than angry. She told me everything, Harold said. We're sending money together now, official-like. After they left, Amara sat in stunned silence. Her gift hadn't brought shame or destruction. It had brought healing. You helped them, Jed said from the doorway. I never thought it could work that way. Your grandmother knew. That's why she called it a gift. Word spread quietly through Millfield Creek. Not gossip or fear, but whispered hope. People began finding excuses to visit Amara's cabin. A farmer struggling with gambling debts. A young woman terrified of her upcoming marriage. A shopkeeper eaten alive by guilt over past mistakes. Each time, Amara's gift forced them to speak their hidden truths. And each time, instead of condemnation, she offered understanding and guidance. The farmer admitted his addiction and found the strength to ask for help. The young woman confessed her fears and gained confidence in her choice. The shopkeeper spoke his guilt aloud and found the courage to make amends. With each person helped, Amara's understanding of herself transformed. She began carrying herself differently, walking taller, meeting people's eyes without shame. You're glowing, Jed told her one evening. I feel like I'm becoming who I was always meant to be. But not everyone welcomed the changes in town. Sheriff Bartlett noticed people acting differently, secrets being spoken aloud, old patterns being broken. He cornered Jed outside the general store one afternoon. That girl's got some kind of hold on folks, Bartlett said. People confessing things that should stay buried. It ain't natural. Maybe it's exactly what this town needs. Bartlett's eyes narrowed. You defending her? I'm stating facts. Well, here's a fact for you, Cowboy. Folks around here don't take kindly to troublemakers, especially her kind. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jed watched Bartlett walk away, understanding that their peaceful days were numbered. That evening, he found Amara tending her small garden behind the cabin. The setting sun painted everything golden. Bartlett's getting nervous, he said. About what? About you helping people. About change. Amara straightened, dirt on her hands. Change scares people who profit from things staying the same. He's dangerous, Amara. Men like him don't give up power easily. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much, but still held hope. Then I guess we'd better be ready. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon again, but this time, Amara didn't run inside to hide. She stood her ground and watched them come. The stream of visitors to Amara's cabin grew steadier each week. They came at dusk mostly, when shadows offered cover from prying eyes. Word spread through hushed conversations and grateful tears. Tom Fletcher arrived on a Tuesday evening, his hands shaking as he knocked. The local blacksmith had always been respected in town. Solid, dependable. But the weight he carried showed in his slumped shoulders. I heard you help folks face their troubles, he said. Amara invited him inside. When their eyes met across her small table, the truth poured out of him like water through a broken dam. I've been drinking away my earnings every night for 3 years. My wife thinks I'm saving for our future, but I've spent everything. We're going to lose the shop. The confession hung heavy between them. Tom covered his face with his calloused hands. She deserves better than a drunk for a husband. She deserves the truth, Amara said gently. And a chance to fight for your future together. What if she leaves me? What if she doesn't? Tom left that night with purpose in his step instead of shame in his heart. 2 days later, Amara saw him walking through town with his wife, both of them heading toward the new temperance meeting at the church. Each success built Amara's confidence. She began to understand her grandmother's words about healing. Truth, even painful truth, could set people free from the prisons they built for themselves. Jed watched her transformation with quiet pride. The frightened girl who had hidden from the world was becoming a woman who faced it head on. "You're not the same person I met in that storm," he told her one evening. "Neither are you." It was true. Jed had stopped talking about moving on. His temporary job at the ranch had become permanent. He'd started making plans that stretched beyond the next paycheck. "I love watching you help people," he said. "It's like watching someone discover they have wings." Their relationship deepened with each shared sunset. Conversations that lasted until dawn. Comfortable silences that spoke louder than words. The kiss they'd shared had opened a door neither wanted to close. But Sheriff Bartlett noticed everything. The changes in people's behavior. The way certain townspeople no longer seemed ashamed or afraid. The quiet confidence in their voices when they spoke. He didn't like change. Change meant questions. Questions meant scrutiny. And scrutiny was the last thing Bartlett needed. "Something's got to be done about that girl," he told his deputy one morning. "She's got some kind of unnatural influence over folks. Maybe folks are just tired of carrying their burdens alone." Bartlett's eyes narrowed. "You defending her too?" The deputy looked away. Half the town had started seeing Amara differently. The other half still feared what they didn't understand. Friday afternoon brought the confrontation Amara had been dreading. Sheriff Bartlett appeared at her cabin with 3 other men. Their faces held the familiar mixture of fear and hatred she knew too well. "We need to settle this once and for all," Bartlett announced. "Folks are claiming you got some kind of power over them, making them say things against their will." "I don't make anyone do anything." "Prove it." Bartlett stepped closer. "Look me in the eyes. Do your worst." Amara hesitated. She'd learned to use her gift carefully, with consent, but Bartlett's challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. "I don't think you want that, Sheriff." "I ain't afraid of some girl's parlor tricks." The other men murmured agreement. They'd come looking for proof that she was a fraud. Amara realized they wouldn't leave without it. She lifted her eyes to meet Bartlett's gaze directly. The effect was immediate and devastating. "I've been taking bribes from the railroad company," Bartlett said, his voice flat and emotionless. "They pay me to look the other way when they force farmers off their land. I've got over $300 hidden under my floorboards." The silence that followed was deafening. The men with him stepped back as if burned. One of them was a farmer who'd lost his property to the railroad just last month. Bartlett's face went white, then red with rage. "You witch! You made me say that." "I didn't make you do anything," Amara said quietly. "I just made you tell the truth. That wasn't truth. That was some kind of spell." But the damage was done. The farmers in the group exchanged knowing looks. Too many of them had lost land under suspicious circumstances. Too many had suspected Bartlett's involvement. "Is it true, Sheriff?" one of them asked. Bartlett's hand moved toward his gun, but Jed appeared beside Amara, like a shadow made solid. "I wouldn't," Jed said, his voice calm but carrying the promise of violence. Bartlett looked between them, calculating odds. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he said. "People need to know what she really is." After they left, Amara sank into her chair. Her hands shook as she poured water from her pitcher. "I shouldn't have done that," she said. "He forced your hand. I humiliated him in front of his men. He'll never forgive that." Jed knelt beside her chair. "Some truths need to see daylight, even when it hurts. He's going to come for me now, really come for me." "Then we'd better be ready." Outside, storm clouds gathered again. But this time, the storm brewing had nothing to do with weather. Bartlett would rally every frightened, prejudiced voice in town. He'd turn her gift into something twisted and evil in their minds. The peaceful days were over. The real fight was just beginning. Sheriff Bartlett wasted no time spreading his poison through Millfield Creek. By Sunday morning, half the town buzzed with whispers about witchcraft and unnatural powers. Fear spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. She made me confess against my will, Bartlett told anyone who would listen. Got some kind of dark magic in those eyes of hers. The truth about the railroad bribes got buried under accusations of sorcery. People who might have demanded justice instead worried about protecting themselves from supernatural threats. But not everyone believed Bartlett's version of events. Tom Fletcher stood up during the town meeting that evening, his wife beside him. "That girl helped save my marriage," Tom said. "Helped me find the courage to face my demons. Ain't nothing evil about helping folks heal." "She bewitched you," Bartlett shot back. "Made you think her curse was a blessing." Mrs. Fulton rose from her seat. "She helped my Harold and me, too, brought us closer together than we'd been in years." More voices joined them. The farmer who'd beaten his gambling addiction, the young bride who'd found confidence, a dozen others whose lives had been quietly transformed. The town split down the middle. Those who'd experienced Amara's gift defended her. Those who feared what they didn't understand rallied behind Bartlett's accusations. Jed watched from the back of the room as the argument escalated. Voices raised, fingers pointed. The careful peace that had been building crumbled like a house of cards. "We need to get you out of here," he told Amara that night. "At least until things cool down. Running won't solve anything. They'll just say it proves their point. Staying might get you killed." Amara looked out her window at the town lights flickering in the distance. "My grandmother never ran. Even when they called her a witch, too. Your grandmother didn't face down an angry sheriff with a reputation to protect. Maybe it's time someone did." The next few days brought an uneasy calm. People crossed the street to avoid each other. Former friends glared across the divide Bartlett had created. The town felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Mrs. Fulton appeared at Amara's door on Wednesday evening, but she seemed nervous in a way that had nothing to do with Bartlett's threats. "I need to tell you something," Mrs. Fulton said, wringing her hands. "Something I probably should have mentioned before." They sat at Amara's table, but Mrs. Fulton kept glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to burst through it. "I've been getting letters," Mrs. Fulton said, "from a woman in Copper Falls, about 30 miles east. She's been asking questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "About your age, your appearance, your family name." Mrs. Fulton pulled a worn envelope from her apron. "She thinks you might be her daughter." Amara's world tilted sideways. "That's impossible. My parents died when I was small." "Are you certain? Or is that just what you were told?" The letter trembled in Amara's hands as she read it. "Sarah Washington, seamstress in Copper Falls, searching for a daughter lost in a fever epidemic years ago. A daughter who would be 19 now. A daughter named Amara. I told her about you." Mrs. Fulton continued. "About your gift. About the way you carry yourself. She wants to come see for herself." "When?" "She's already on her way. Should arrive tomorrow." Amara set the letter down with shaking fingers. Everything she'd believed about herself, about her history, suddenly felt uncertain. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I wasn't sure. Didn't want to get your hopes up if I was wrong." Mrs. Fulton reached across the table. "But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. You have her eyes." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She paced her small cabin, mind racing with possibilities. A mother, family, someone who might understand her gift from personal experience rather than fear. But morning brought darker news. Jed arrived before dawn, his face grim. "Bartlett's done talking," he said. "He's gathering men, armed men." "When?" "Tonight. He's telling folks you put some kind of spell on half the town. Says the only way to break it is to drive you out permanently." Amara felt the walls of her small world closing in. "How many men?" 8 or 10. Maybe more. "And how many will stand with us?" "Tom Fletcher, a few others. Not enough." They spent the morning preparing. Jed checked his rifle while Amara gathered her few precious possessions. Her grandmother's Bible, a photograph of people she'd believed were distant relatives but might be family. As afternoon shadows lengthened, hoofbeats approached the cabin. But instead of Bartlett's mob, a single rider appeared, a woman in her 40s with dark skin and familiar eyes. She dismounted slowly, studying Amara's face with an expression caught between hope and heartbreak. "You look just like your father," the woman said softly. Amara's knees nearly buckled. "Mama?" Sarah Washington nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I've been looking for you for 19 years. They fell into each other's arms as the sun began to set. 2 decades of grief and separation poured out in that embrace, but their reunion was cut short by the sound of approaching horses. Bartlett's mob crested the hill like a dark storm cloud. 8 men with rifles and torches, faces twisted by fear and hatred. "Time's up," Jed said, stepping between the women and the approaching threat. Sarah looked at her daughter with fierce determination. "No one's taking you from me again." The final confrontation had arrived. Sheriff Bartlett reined in his horse 20 feet from the cabin. The men behind him spread out in a loose semicircle, rifles glinting in the dying light. Their faces showed the ugly mixture of fear and righteous anger that made mobs dangerous. "Time to go." "Girl," Bartlett called out, "you've poisoned this town long enough with your witchcraft." Jed stepped forward, his own rifle cradled casually in his arms. "She's not going anywhere. This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. Step aside." "Everything about her concerns me." Sarah moved to stand beside her daughter, her chin raised in defiance. "You'll have to go through me, too." Bartlett's eyes narrowed as he took in the older woman. "Who the devil are you?" "I'm her mother, and I've lost 19 years with my daughter. I won't lose another minute to cowards with guns." A murmur ran through the mounted men. Some shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. Threatening a lone girl was one thing. Facing down a protective mother changed the equation. "Don't matter who you are," Bartlett said, but his voice carried less conviction. "She's got unnatural powers, makes folks say things against their will." "She makes them tell the truth," Sarah replied, "something you're clearly afraid of." "I already told my truth thanks to her devil's magic." "Then you have nothing left to hide." Bartlett's face reddened. "I won't be mocked by the likes of you." "Look at me," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying an authority that made several horses dance nervously. "What?" "Look me in the eyes, Sheriff. If you're so certain my daughter is evil, prove it. Show these men that our gift comes from darkness." Bartlett hesitated. Something in Sarah's tone suggested she knew exactly what would happen, but backing down now would destroy what remained of his authority. "You got the same curse she does? I have the same gift she does. The gift my grandmother passed to me, and I passed to her. The gift of making people face their deepest truths." The men behind Bartlett exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't the simple confrontation they'd signed up for. "Do it," Bartlett snarled. "Show me your worst." Sarah stepped forward, her dark eyes locking onto Bartlett's with laser intensity. The effect was immediate and devastating. "I became sheriff because I was too much of a coward to fight in the war," Bartlett said, his voice hollow and mechanical. "Every man in this county served except me. I hid behind my badge to feel like a man instead of the frightened child I've always been. Every day I wake up knowing I'm a fraud." The confession hit the assembled men like a physical blow. These were veterans, most of them, men who'd bled for their country while their sheriff cowered at home. "I don't respect any of you," Bartlett continued, unable to stop the flow of truth. "I despise you for having the courage I never had. That's why I took the railroad money. If I couldn't be brave, at least I could be rich." One by one the men lowered their rifles. The righteous anger in their faces transformed into disgust, but now it was aimed at Bartlett instead of Amara. "You yellow-bellied snake," Tom Fletcher spat from the edge of the group. "My brother died at Gettysburg while you were playing dress-up with that badge." Bartlett seemed to snap back to awareness, realizing what he'd revealed. His hand dropped toward his gun, but Jed's rifle swung up to cover him. "I wouldn't," Jed said quietly. "You're all bewitched," Bartlett screamed. "Can't you see what they're doing to your minds?" But the spell was broken. The men began turning their horses away, unwilling to follow a coward and a thief into battle against a family. "This isn't over," Bartlett called after them, but his voice cracked with desperation. "Yes, it is," Tom Fletcher said. "Come Monday. We're having a new election for sheriff. You can count on that." Within minutes, only Bartlett remained. He sat his horse like a man who'd lost everything, which in many ways he had. His authority, his reputation, his carefully constructed facade had all crumbled in a matter of minutes. "You should leave," Sarah told him. "Tonight, before the town decides what to do with a corrupt sheriff." Bartlett's shoulders sagged in defeat. He turned his horse without another word and rode toward town, a broken man fleeing the wreckage of his own making. As dust settled in his wake, Amara felt the weight of choice pressing down on her. The immediate threat had passed, but bigger questions remained. "You could come with me," Sarah said softly. "Back to Copper Falls. We could start over together." "What about the people here who need help?" "There are people everywhere who need help, daughter. But you only get one chance to rebuild a family." Jed stepped closer, his eyes gentle but sad. "She's right, Amara. You've got a chance most folks only dream about. What about us? We'll always have what we shared, but this is bigger than us." Amara looked between her mother and the man who'd changed everything with a single kiss. Two different paths stretched before her, two different futures. The choice would reshape everything she'd built in Millfield Creek. But for the first time in her life, she had the luxury of choosing from love rather than fear. The decision would come at dawn. Tonight, she would hold on to both possibilities for a few precious hours more. Dawn broke soft and golden over Millfield Creek. Amara stood in her doorway watching the sun paint the desert in shades of hope. Behind her, Sarah packed the few belongings they would take on their journey east. The decision had been made in the quiet hours before sunrise. "I need to say goodbye," Amara told her mother. Sarah nodded, understanding written in her weathered features. "I'll ready the horses." Amara found Jed by the creek that gave the town its name. He skipped stones across the water with practiced ease, each throw sending ripples toward the far bank. "Leaving today," she said, settling beside him on a fallen log. "Figured as much." He didn't look at her, just kept throwing stones. "It's the right choice." "Is it? You get your family back. You get a fresh start somewhere people don't know your history. You can use your gift openly from the beginning." "And you?" Jed finally met her eyes. "I'll miss you every day for the rest of my life. But I'll be proud of you too." They sat in comfortable silence watching the water flow. Everything important had already been said between them. Words would only make the parting harder. "I want you to know something," Amara said finally. "That night in the storm changed everything for me. Not just the kiss. The way you saw me as human instead of cursed. You changed everything for me too. Showed me that drifting isn't the same as living." Sarah appeared at the edge of the creek bank, leading two saddled horses. The moment of departure had arrived. Jed stood first, then helped Amara to her feet. They faced each other in the morning light, memorizing details they would carry forever. "Will you write?" he asked. "If you want me to." "I want you to." He lifted her one final time, holding her against his chest the way he had that first night. Their last kiss tasted of goodbye and possibility, sorrow and hope intertwined. When he set her down, tears tracked silently down both their faces. "Take care of yourself, Amara Washington." "Take care of yourself, Jed Morrison." The ride to Copper Falls took 3 days through territory that grew greener as they traveled east. Sarah filled the hours with stories of Amara's early childhood, memories preserved like pressed flowers in the pages of a book. "You were fearless as a little girl," Sarah said as they made camp the second night. "Always asking questions. Always wanting to help people. What happened to us? How did we get separated? Fever swept through our town when you were 7. So many people died, including your father. In all the chaos, you went missing. They told me you'd died too. Showed me a grave with your name on it. But I was alive. Someone must have taken you during the confusion, Probably thought they were saving you. By the time I realized you might still be alive, the trail was cold. You never stopped looking. Never. I followed every rumor, chased every lead. When Mrs. Fulton's letter arrived describing a girl with our family's gift, I knew it had to be you. Copper Falls turned out to be a thriving town built around a lumber mill. Clean streets lined with painted houses, children playing safely in yards, a place where Amara could walk without fear. Sarah's seamstress shop occupied the ground floor of a tidy building on Main Street. Living quarters upstairs provided space for both women. It felt like home from the moment Amara crossed the threshold. People here know about my gift, Sarah explained. They come to me when they need help sorting truth from lies. It's respected here, not feared. Within a week, word spread about Sarah's daughter. Visitors began appearing at the shop, seeking the same kind of guidance Amara had provided in Millfield Creek. But here, they came openly, gratefully. A young man struggling with whether to propose marriage found courage to follow his heart. An older woman tormented by guilt over an ancient mistake discovered forgiveness. A shopkeeper wrestling with bankruptcy learned to ask for help instead of hiding his troubles. Each person helped strengthened Amara's understanding of her purpose. She wasn't cursed or gifted. She was called to something important, something necessary. 3 months into her new life, Amara sat at Sarah's writing desk, composing a letter that had taken weeks to find the right words for. "Dear Jed," she wrote, "Copper Falls has welcomed me with open arms. Mother and I work together helping people find their way through difficult truths. I'm happier than I've ever been, but I think of you often. You gave me the greatest gift possible. You helped me see my worth when I couldn't see it myself. The door is always open if you find yourself traveling this way. Your friend always, Amara." She mailed the letter that afternoon and tried not to count the days until a response might arrive. 2 weeks later, she woke to the sound of hoofbeats outside the shop. From her window, she saw a familiar figure dismounting a travel-worn horse. Jed looked up at her window and touched the brim of his hat in greeting. Sarah smiled from the kitchen doorway. "I believe that's for you." Amara flew down the stairs and into his arms. He spun her around in the morning sunlight while Sarah watched from the window, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Couldn't stay away," Jed said when he finally set her down. "Good," Amara replied. "I was hoping you'd say that." Some connections were too meaningful to leave behind. Some stories were meant to continue beyond their expected endings, and sometimes the greatest truth of all was that love finds a way.